Welcome to the Golden State with Mates post-game live after the 122-117 loss to the San Antonio Spurs in the Warriors' final preseason outing. I'm just going to try and move my laptop here because there is a big light shining in my face. We'll just move that away. Maybe the light can probably still be there, but not so much in my face. We'll move the microphone over as well. Good game. Good positive game for both teams. No injuries, so that's always a good start. Warriors, I mean, let's put it plainly. I mean, the starting lineup got outplayed by the Spurs. Young but incredibly talented starting lineup. Let's be honest. Like, that was pretty plain and simple. They put up 44 points in the first quarter on nearly 70% shooting. They put up 72 points in the first half overall. They got out to an 18-point lead in the third quarter by the time the starters from both teams, but I think the Warriors starters left a little bit earlier in the third quarter. They just got outplayed. It's as simple as that. You go down through the line of the Warriors starters, and they struggled. They really struggled, and it was really the youngsters again, the bench unit, that was a major positive from this game. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll read them out as we go. But yeah, let me know, I guess, your thoughts overall on preseason as well. We'll go through a few things here, both from an individual and a team standpoint. I just want to start with Victor Wembanyama. I think I have to. Everything is advertised and more. Like, it is actually ridiculous. I don't think I don't think this is a hot take when I say that I think he's winning Defensive Player of the Year this year in his rookie year. And I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think he's one of the favorites. He should be one of the favorites. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. The biggest thing for me with his defense is the fact that he has a room for error on that end of the floor that no player has ever had in NBA history, and I don't think it's particularly close. So what I watched Anthony Davis play, obviously for the Lakers against Phoenix yesterday. Sorry, and I think he had 4 or 5 blocks in the first. He was absolutely erasing everything at the rim. His timing at the rim and his positioning defensively is absolutely elite, outstanding. He's got nothing on Victor Wembanyama in terms of the room for error that he has on the defensive end of the floor. So what I mean by that is he can afford to gap shooters, right? Like, if he gets switched on to, Steph, Clay, CP3, he was kind of guarding Wiggs mainly. He can afford to gap everyone out on the perimeter because he knows with his length and wingspan, he's going to contest jump shots even if he's standing a few feet away, kind of thing. Like, no one else has that capacity. Maybe like who? Giannis, maybe, but still, I wouldn't even say Gian. Like, this guy's he's an alien. He's ridiculous. It's flat out not fair. Some of the things he was doing in the first quarter was he was taking the piss. He was taking the PISS out of the Warriors. And this is a team that is playing with 4 future Hall of 3. I mean, Draymond was out today, so I suppose 3 future Hall of Famers. And in Clay, Steph, and CP. A former number 1 overall pick, second best player on a championship team 2 years ago in Andrew Wiggins. Very good starting caliber center in Kevon Looney. And he was just taking the piss. He really was. On both ends of the floor to an extent. I'll talk about his offense in a second. His offense isn't quite as impressive as his defense. We'll get to the Warriors stuff in a minute, but I thought it best to mention Wemby. Like, he can gap players on the perimeter. He can afford to be blown by because he knows he can make up for it with chase down blocks with his length. And you have to like, as an offense, you legitimately have to try and play away from him as much as you can. And we saw some possessions where the Warriors were completely discombobulated, where, Steph or Clay or Chris or Wiggs would have Wemby kind of on an island almost. And you think, okay, maybe, 7'4", 7'5", he's slow. I can try and work something out here to get an effective shot. No, just no. Like, and even some of the shots that the Warriors did make over him, it's almost laughable. The kind of different arcs they had to put on the shot. I suppose, like, the big one was the Kuminga one in the second quarter where JK kind of got into him then tried to pump fake. Wemby didn't really fall for it, but he had at that point, he created enough of a gap where he made a little baseline jump shot, but the arc on it had to be so high. It was an incredibly skillful jump shot. Like it was, and the fact that JK actually recognized that was fantastic. It was a great shot. But just the fact he had to do it is just, it's laughable. It really is. Like some of the Wiggs stuff. I mean, he blocked Wiggs a couple of times. He blocked Steph. He blocked Clay on one in the first quarter, and then got a transition dunk. It's just, as I said, the room for error for me is the big thing. There's just no one in NBA history that's had this amount of room for error where you can actually, you can do, if you're him, you can do stuff that every other player in the league cannot get away with, but you can get away with it just by your sheer size and length. And it's unbelievable. Uh, Offensively, still too jump shot reliant for me. Like he finished 19 points, 8 of 19 from the field. So he's actually largely inefficient. Again, too many jumpers, probably too many threes. I feel like Pop's going to get him in better positions come the regular season where you get him the ball close to the rim, basically, rather than, giving him the ball on the perimeter and him either jacking up a three or having to put the ball on the floor. Yes, he looks like a solid ball handler, but at the end of the day, he's 7'4", 7'5". There are going to be plenty of times where if he's dribbling the ball too much and having to start his plays from outside of the perimeter, he's going to have the ball stripped on plenty of occasions. That's just the reality. He's 7'4", 7'5". So I think Pop will do a better job of getting getting him the ball closer to the rim so he can start making his plays and whatever else from the mid post area rather than jacking up threes on the perimeter or having to dribble from outside the perimeter. So too jump shot reliant, 8 and 19. He was actually he had the kind of first quarter where I think he made 5 of his first 9. He had 12 points. It was ridiculous. But from there, he was actually largely inefficient. So again, that's really the Warriors hoping more than anything. I don't think the Warriors did anything defensively to make any issues for him. I think it was just him missing shots and being too reliant on jumpers. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I do understand from his perspective. I do understand why you would just fall in love with taking jumper after jumper because at that height, that size, you're not actually any contest really isn't a contest. So they're really just open jumpers the whole time. They are legitimately open jumpers. But you're letting the defense off the hook if you're him by taking those rather than trying to get a better shot at the rim. And I think he needs to do a little bit better of a job there. And I'm sure that's something that he'll develop as time goes on. He clearly doesn't necessarily like contact, and that's what the good players, the good teams will force upon him throughout the season is on both ends of the floor. We saw that Wiggins layup early in the third quarter where, Wiggs had got blocked a couple of times and then he went to the rim, kind of jumped into Wemby, kept him flat-footed, made a layup over him. That was a nice move. That's what, everyone's going to try and do to him because otherwise he's just going to block everything. I think he'll win Defensive Player of the Year. And I don't think that's necessarily it comes in here and there's clearly a media narrative around him about how good this guy's going to be. So anything he does is going to be hyped up to an extent that we may have never seen before. But the hype is real. Don't get me wrong. The hype is absolutely legitimate. And some of the stuff he does defensively is, we've never seen it before. And I've seen people say he might be to defense what Steph is to offense. I don't think that's the case because the reason why Steph's so loved and why he's so relatable for a lot of people is because Steph's 6'3", right? He's tall for the average person, no doubt, but he's not some kind of freak of nature. He is in regards to shooting the ball. There's no doubt about that. But there are people that are going to look at Steph and think, hey, I can be him. If I put in the hard yards, if I work hard enough, if I develop my game over time, maybe I can be Steph Curry, right? No one, you can't be Wemby. So people are saying that what he's going to do defensively is what Steph does offensively. Okay, I get that to a point. It might revolutionize the game, but you can't just be Wemby. Now, it might be too simplistic to say, oh, anyone can be Steph. That's not true. No, it's hard to be Steph. We haven't seen another Steph yet. But at least there's a realistic chance that anyone that's 6'2", 6'3" can be Steph Curry. You can't be Victor Wembanyama. You can't. It's ridiculous. So I just wanted to, before I get into kind of some individual things from a Warrior perspective here, I just want to talk about them as a team, because I think this was the first time where it really became apparent the lack of size is an issue, right? Against a team like this in the Spurs. And I'm not talking about just Wemby, who's 7'4", 7'5", but they are, with Sohan starting at the point, they are starting 5 guys that are all 6'6", 6'7", and above. You've got Sohan 6'7", Vassell 6'6", Keldon Johnson 6'6", 6'7", Wemby's 20 foot, and Zach Collins is what 6'10", 6'11", maybe. And they're all incredibly skilled. Like, it's kind of Sohan's the poorest of the shooters out of those, but Zach Collins can step out. We've seen Wemby loves to step out and hit threes. So this was the first time where it became, in that first half, where it became apparent that, hey, the Warriors' lack of size. They went back to the starting lineup of Steph, Chris, Clay, Wiggs, Loon. Spurs had 10 offensive rebounds in the first half that led to 15 more field goal attempts. They had 57 field goal attempts in the first half to the Warriors' 42. And that was the difference, really, in opening up a 9-point lead. Just going to check some comments here. Darren C says, how many minutes do you think Moody should get per game? So I'm happy to bring this forward. I was going to talk about Moses soon, but I'll bring that forward. I thought he was really good. I thought he's clearly the best player in the fourth quarter. Finished with 18 points, led the Warriors, 7 of 11 shooting, 4 of 6 from 3, hit a couple late to nearly look like the Warriors could steal victory. He needs to be in the rotation. There's no doubt about that. I've had a little bit of a Twitter conversation with someone already about the fact that, like, you've got a 6'6" wing here who legitimately, I think, is a 40% three-point shooter. He's a very, he's developing into a very good NBA three-point shooter. If you've got that, you have to utilize it, right? He's not some 6'3", 6'4" one where, it's a situational player kind of thing if you need a bucket or if you're really trying to dive into your offense. Like, he's 6'6", 6'7", good wingspan, reasonable athleticism. I liked a couple of his, the last couple of games I've liked. I spoke about it on Wednesday, the drive he had against Keegan Murray where he finished at the rim, made a couple of nice mid-ranges off the bounce. He's got a little bit more than just catch and shoot to his game. I think the defense will come along more. He had a really nice block on Sohan. I think it was in the third quarter where he kind of came back on the play. Sohan's got a really slow, it's not a good jumper at all, and it's kind of a slow load up on it. So it's kind of easy to get back and potentially heavily contest or block his jumper like Moody did in that play. That was impressive. He's a good rebounder. He's a largely good decision maker when he does have the ball in his hands. He knows when to pick his moments kind of thing in terms of taking jumpers. I think he looks a lot more assured and confident with just his shot in general and his general offense so far in preseason. There were times last season where he wasn't as emphatic offensively. He wasn't as aggressive. And when you're not, he's out there for his offense, right? When you're comparing him with like a Gary Payton II, he's out there for offensive purposes rather than Payton defense. So if you're not going to be aggressive offensively, then you just shouldn't be on the floor and you should have Payton in. But he's developed a wide gulf here between his offense and Payton's offense to the point where I think Moody should be playing more, and he didn't play at all in the first half tonight. That's odd to me, given he's 12 for 22 on threes in preseason. I think he needs to be playing at least 15 minutes a game. He really does. And he's too good. I think he's too good. And he's too good of a three-point shooter to have spot minutes in the rotation where he's not playing every night. I think he needs to have a consistent role. I think if Steve gives him that, you'll get fruitful production from him. He's only going to get better. I know Steve probably prefers the trust that Gary Payton II gives him. There's a little bit more experience there. He's been in big games. Um, I get that. But at some point, you got to pull the trigger and say, hey, this is a guy who can be a 6'6", 6'7" wing, who can be a 40% three-point shooter, who's got a little bit more than just catch and shoot elements to his offensive game. He's a good decision maker. He's not a great defender, but he's not a disastrous defender either. Like he's a steady defender. I think he's got high IQ. He can be a good, solid team defender. Individually, I think he could do a little bit more. I'm still worried about him getting blown by off the dribble against perimeter guys, but he's steady. It's not like he's a disaster defensively. I think he needs to play. Like he needs to play 15, 20 minutes every game. He needs a consistent role. But credit to him because regardless of what role he gets and regardless of the kind of up and down opportunity he gets, he always stays ready. He doesn't get any minutes in the first half, let alone, and then comes out third, fourth quarter, has 18 points, 7-11 shooting, 4 of 6. Super aggressive. Impressive. Really impressive. He needs to play. So that's a kind of long answer to your question, but I appreciate it. And I thought I'd get into that and get into Moses Moody now when you ask it, which I'm happy to do with it if people have got questions about any other players and my thoughts on them. But back to my initial kind of conversation around the size and the defense. Clearly concerns defensively throughout this preseason. However, Draymond is out. And it'd be like Steph not playing in the preseason and then having question marks about the Warriors offense. Like you can't evaluate it when the best and the most impactful player to that element is not there. And so for the Warriors, not having Draymond, I mean, you just can't evaluate the defense without him. He is the conductor of everything they do defensively. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes back. I do have, going back to what I spoke about after the Kings game in terms of should they be starting this lineup that we saw tonight or should they be starting maybe Kuminga instead of Chris Paul? I am a little bit worried and a little bit concerned if it sounds like Draymond, so he's started 3-on-3 drills, he'll ramp up to 5-on-5. If he was there opening night and he's coming off, or whenever he comes back, right, and he's coming off the bench, I am like, how is that dynamic gonna play out when you've got Draymond and Kuminga coming off the bench? Because to me, like, and I'll get into Kuminga soon, but like, that guy should be playing 25 minutes. Draymond will probably be on a 25-minute limit. Ideally, I think you'd have one of those guys starting, one of them coming off the bench, and not having both of them coming off the bench. But we'll just see how Steve plays it out. But the Spurs are dangerous. They're going to be dangerous against any team because they've got Wemby, who is just an absolute freak. They've got a lot more young talent than just him. Like Devin Vassell, I didn't think played overly well. Like he was okay in this one. He had 25 points in the first half the other night. Like he's a very good young player. Zach Collins, I'm really happy he's looking fit and healthy and looking like a pretty good contributor. Sohan, again, the jump shot's an issue, but defensively he can be a menace and he's got some playmaking elements to him and they're clearly happy to give him the ball and let him run the offense to an extent. And Keldon Johnson's a guy who got $80 million and, is a pretty good third or fourth scorer for you. Absolutely. So they're a very talented young team and they are going to give a lot of teams issues, particularly the Warriors who are small, particularly. So you're facing the Spurs multiple times this season. Do not lock in that the fact that the Warriors are going to win all those games because there is a genuine chance that the Spurs steal a win or two against the Warriors. Particularly, going back to San Antonio, I couldn't be higher on their young core. They are very, very good. And they're different, right? So if you go back to the Kings games, I think the Kings are a very good offensive team, but they actually suit the Warriors because their best two offensive players are De'Aaron Fox, who's a 6'3" guard, or 6'2", 6'3". He's very good, don't get me wrong, but at least Steph, Chris can compete against a 6'2", 6'3" De'Aaron Fox. Yes, he's incredibly athletic, incredibly quick, maybe the fastest player in the league, bar Ja, maybe. So you're not necessarily going to stop De'Aaron Fox, but at least he can try and compete. And then Sabonis, very skilled, all-star level center. He also doesn't have much of a jumper, and he's only 6'10", 6'11". It's not like he's 7'1", 7'2". And so the Warriors can compete with those two guys. They have options they can put on them, right? Like we saw what Looney did to Sabonis. We saw what Jackson Davis did to Sabonis in that preseason game on Wednesday. And then if Fox gets off the lead, GP2 is kind of an ideal defender for him. So the Warriors match up well with the Kings, but I have some issues. A team like the Spurs with their size, a team like the Lakers when you got LeBron and Anthony Davis, that's a worry. And then the Suns, we'll see on opening night, like KD, like a guy like him, 7-footer with you. I mean, no one's stopping Kevin Durant, but the Warriors probably don't have a matchup for him like other teams might, where you've got a guy who's 6'9", 6'10", who can go and guard KD. Again, maybe Kuminga develops into that guy. I'd like Wiggins to be better defensively than what we've seen during preseason, probably what we even saw last season. We'd like him to get back to kind of an all-NBA level defender, which he spoke about a couple of weeks ago. That's where he'd like to get to be an all-NBA level defender. Some of the individual stuff here, the starting lineup was poor. We'll go through. I thought Chris played pretty well. 5, 5, and 5. 2 of 5 shooting, 2 steals, 18 minutes. The most impressive aspect with him, again, was the second unit stuff. The connection that he has with Saric and Kuminga already. I mean, that's the biggest positive. If you're looking at things to take away from this preseason, that is the biggest positive. The bench/second unit, when you can have Chris Paul out there running the show with Saric and Kuminga. And then whoever else, like you want, like is Clay going to play some in there? Moody, GP2, Wiggins, like whoever else you want to fill that out with, like just those three, Paul, Saric, Kuminga, that's an impressive second unit, and that is going to beat up on a lot of opposition teams. It will. And you compare that to last season with all the bench struggles the Warriors had, like that's the biggest positive. And already the chemistry that that trio kind of has together is fantastic. And we saw Chris today. The pick and roll stuff that he can run with Saric. Like Saric is so good because I've been speaking about it for 3 or 4 months now. Like the offensive versatility he has, where in a pick and roll situation, he can roll and he can have some crafty finishes at the rim. He's not going to detonate at the ring like Kuminga might, but he's got some craftiness around the rim. He can make a pass. He can find someone on the roll, or he can orchestrate a pick and pop and go and knock him down from outside the arc. Like he's so good in this Warriors second unit. And again, he 17 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 6 of 8 shooting, 2 of 4 from 3 today for Dario Saric. Super underrated. It continues to go under the radar, that kind of signing. So absolutely fantastic. And the Chris Paul dynamic with him and Kuminga. We saw a play where CP got to the rim where Kuminga kind of sealed his guy off and allowed CP to lane to the rim. And CP went and kind of rubbed him on the head and just smiled at him and said, like, how good was that, basically? And there's a connection going on there, which has got to be very, very fun and have a lot of optimism for Warrior fans in terms of what that kind of combination could do this season. Just quickly, like standard Loon, 7 and 5. Steph didn't shoot the ball well at all. 2 of 11, 1 of 6 from 3-point range. Again, there were some plays where, Wemby was close by where Steph was doing some stuff where he wouldn't necessarily do it if Wemby wasn't out on the floor. And that, again, just goes down to the kind of difference-making element that Victor Wembanyama brings, even against the greatest offensive players of all time, like Steph. But again, it's preseason. We saw him on Wednesday against the Kings go absolutely off for 16 in the last 5 minutes. We're not concerned about it whatsoever. Wiggs, pretty disappointing. Like Wemby got the better of his matchup. I mean, unsurprising. Like Wemby's just like, you might be a top 30 guy in the league already, and Andrew Wiggins probably isn't that. Wemby's just probably a better player than Wiggs. I hate to say it, but that's probably just facts. He had that nice slap, as I spoke about earlier in the third quarter, where he got into him, and that's what he's, when they play again and he's got that matchup, he's going to have to do that more. And then Clay, I was up and about for Clay. He made 3 of his first 4 shots. He had, I think, 7 or 9 points maybe in the first quarter. Looked good. And then it was back to poor Clay. Darren says, yeah, he needs 15, 20 minutes for sure. Keep it up, bro. I like your stuff. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming in, Darren. Looking forward to more of your comments moving forward. Clay finished 3 for 13 from the field, 1 of 8 from 3-point range. I spoke about it after the Kings game. He's not getting his looks. There's something, and I guess this is when you lose a step physically, athletically. The jump shots that were previously, wide open or open are now semi-contested, and it makes a difference. And all off season, we've heard about how good physically and athletically Clay looks. I haven't seen that. I'm sorry, I haven't seen that. I've liked some of his stuff in terms of like defensive rebounding, but I'm sorry, like I know that's important if they're going to play the small ball lineups. Like I don't want to throw that away and say doesn't matter. So his defensive rebounding stuff has been better in this preseason, and that's important. But Klay Thompson isn't out there for his defensive rebounding. I'll tell you that much. Some of his post defensive work has been good, but again, he's not out there for his post defense. It helps. It does. It makes these small ball lineups more playable for Steve Kerr. But he ain't out there for his post defense and his rebound. He's out there to be a 20-point per game scorer, to be a 40% 3-point shooter, he needs to be able to shoot at least 45% from the field overall. And in this preseason, he was under 30% going into this game and then shoots 3 of 13. I mean, I'm sorry, Clay. Let me reiterate. Klay Thompson is my favorite ever Golden State Warrior. He's my favorite NBA player ever. Like, I love this guy. But if this continues into the regular season, we're going to have conversations. One, about his role on the team, how many minutes he gets, whether he's a guaranteed starter. And then the other element, of course, is the contractual situation, where I think he should be getting the Draymond Wiggs number of 4-year 100, 4-year 110, around there. I've seen people on Twitter say like 3-year 50 or around 15 million a season, which I laughed at that initially. I thought that was ridiculous and ludicrous. Based on preseason, those people making those statements may have a point. In preseason, he has looked like a $10-15 million player, if that. Not a $25 to $30 million player. I mean, if I were him and the Warriors were offering 90 million plus over a 4-year deal, I might take that right now. Because if this continues, and that's not going to happen. Like, Clay's going to back himself, and he should back himself to be better, to get back to his not prime form, because I think we acknowledge that won't happen. But at some point, he's got to turn things around. He won't want to continue this form for another 5-6 games into the regular season, because that'll be tough for him, because he's a very prideful player, right? He thinks he can get back to his best, and sometimes, unfortunately, that's to a detriment for the team, because sometimes his shot selection and his decision making, it's not arrogant. I'm not going to call it arrogant, but there's a confidence to his game that may not necessarily align with his performances and his skill set at the moment. Certainly, probably the biggest thing to kind of look at from a Warrior perspective going forward is the form of Klay Thompson, because they need him to be at least what he was last season, which was a 21 point per game scorer on 41% 3-point shooting. They need him to be at least that. If he isn't, that's a big worry. Big worry. We'll get into some more of the bench kind of second unit young player stuff. Spoke about Kuminga and Saric. Just quickly on JK. So his preseason, 24, 26, 28 points, 18 and 6 against the Kings on Wednesday. and then plays. How many minutes did he play? He didn't play much, which to me actually says that, hey, this guy's ready to go. We need him in the regular season. Like, Steve had no interest in seeing him in the fourth quarter at all. Like, that goes to show he's just a guaranteed part of the rotation, and you didn't need to see any more if you're Steve Kerr. He played 20 minutes, 13 points on 4 of 6 shooting, 1 of 2 from deep, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. That was the best aspect. Some of his playmaking stuff in this one was, I mean, that play, I think it was the last play of the third quarter, where he got the board, dribbled through traffic down the other end, and then found cutting Moody for the layup. That was impressive. That was as impressive as anything else he's done in this preseason, and it has been a unbelievable preseason from Jonathan Kuminga. The most impressive and the biggest positive to take out of this preseason, I think, just from an individual perspective for the Warriors. He needs to play 25 plus minutes a game. He just does. The interesting conversation here is, and I've spoke about it with a lot of people, and I heard them on the Warriors, Tim Kawakami, Anthony Slater, Marcus Thompson on the Warriors Plus Minus podcast previewing the season. They had the discussion of where Jonathan Kuminga can end up at the end of the season in terms of the Warriors' best players. They were very conservative on it, and probably rightly so. They said, he could be their 6th best player. Maybe he can get up to their 4th best player. I might even go higher than that in terms of like genuine optimism. And I'm not saying that he's a guarantee to be a top 3 player on this team, but I think there's a chance. I think by the end of the season, in another 80 games, I think there's a genuine possibility he's a top 3 player on this team. The kind of X factor element with him is proven in the fact that he could be a top 3 player on this team in 80 games. And the other end of the spectrum is in 50, 60 games, he could be off the team. He could be off the team because maybe this preseason stuff doesn't translate, and he still can't quite fit into the system. Steve still can't quite trust him, and they move him by the deadline. Or, as Slater pointed out in that podcast, maybe he does play well and he lifts his trade value to a point where the combination of Chris Paul's contract and Jonathan Kuminga's talent actually gets you a really, really damn good player by the trade deadline that can help you hopefully win a championship this season. But I personally think Kuminga is a part of Golden State's current and future plans, obviously. I think he can be a top 3 player on this team by the end of the season. That's kind of the level, like the highest level I think he could get to. Right now, he's clearly top 7. Is he 7th or is he like 4th, 5th, or 6th? I don't know. You don't want to go too hard too early on it because, again, it's preseason. We're going to have to see it in the regular season, but he just gives the Warriors something that they otherwise don't have. We've spoken about Saric, really impressive. There are going to be nights where he's kind of the 7th guy over JK, just because of the offensive skill set he provides and what he could offer in certain matchups compared to Kuminga. So that's fine. The Warriors are deep. The Warriors are really deep because their fourth quarter was good and the young guys were good again. I just want to talk quickly about a few of the question marks here. So, third string point guard behind Steph and Chris. Is it Corey Joseph or is it Pods? Pods had a great start to preseason, including that double-double against the Lakers. And nothing against Pods here, but you look at both of them, they're kind of similar in terms of they're both steady and reliable ball handlers and playmakers. They're going to offer you an incredibly good assist-to-turnover ratio. And that's a great thing for Steve Kerr, the fact that you've got two guys there who you can plug in and they're not going to make mistakes with the ball in their hands. I do think at this point that Corey Joseph is a much better scoring threat. And I think that's what's going to give him the edge here in terms of the third string point guard position. So I actually think as impressive as his preseason was, where ultimately we're not going to see much of Podziemski throughout the regular season. He's going to have stints, I think, through the G League with Santa Cruz. He is. I don't think he's going to play much because you've got Steph, you've got Chris Paul, and I think Joseph, just with his experience and mainly the fact that he's just a better scoring threat. So Joseph had 7 points today, I think, on 3 for 3 shooting, I believe. And Pods, I mean, he's a very good young player. Don't get me wrong, but some of the scoring stuff. So he's 1 of 4, missed both his threes. I don't think his threes are going in when he puts them up. I'm not confident in that. He needs to work on his floater because he missed 1 or 2 of those. And again, those are shots when he puts them up. I don't necessarily expect them to go in. So there needs to be kind of a trust factor there in his scoring that I don't think you can have right now, which is going to put him behind Corey Joseph in the rotation. But nonetheless, impressive preseason for Brandon Podziemski. I think you'd have to be higher on him after the preseason than you were going into it. Just check to see, because I've got my notes over these comments. There's no more comments, I don't think, at this point. Nope. Moody, I've spoken about. Jackson Davis, weird one because he obviously had that double-double against the Kings two days ago. Really impressive against Sabonis. And then doesn't play till the fourth quarter in this one. And again, plays really well. 6 points, 3 rebounds, 2 blocks, including Mamu Kalashvili. Mamu, we'll just call him that. Came charging down the lane, tried to throw it down, and Trace was like, no, not having a bar of that. Met him at the summit. His positioning defensively and the versatility that he gives you defensively is fantastic. And he's going to get some minutes here and there. It's not going to be on a regular basis. He's not going to play every game. He might go 4 or 5 games without playing. But I think he's already showcasing to Steve, to the rest of the team, to the fans, that he can be out there at any point, probably in any, like he can play in second units. He could probably, like if Loon's out a game and you've got to start Trace Jackson Davis and he has to play next to Steph and Chris and Clay, Wiggs, Dre, whatever other combination it is, like if he has to start some games, I'm not going to have an issue with it. I think that's fine. I think he could legitimately be okay. Now, depending on the matchup, obviously. I mean, if he's having a guard like Jokic or Embiid, then clearly that's a different story. But outside of that, I mean, I don't think there's that many incredibly talented, unguardable centers that are going to be able to give him too much trouble. I mean, Sabonis gave him some trouble at points, don't get me wrong, on Wednesday, but he fought pretty hard. He fought pretty hard and did as good a job as he could have expected. So, again, impressive final quarter from him. The last one I want to kind of speak about. So, the fight for the 14th roster spot has seemingly come down to Rodney McGruder and Rudy Gay. They brought in Javonte Green for a grand total of 2 minutes. Did he actually enter the facility? The Warriors signed him the other day, I think on the 16th it was, and then 2 or 3 days later, nah, that's enough. I didn't really get the point of that. I'm not sure if I think I read a report that he's not actually going to be affiliated with Santa Cruz either. So that was odd. Anyway, so it's really down to McGruder and Gay. Weird that Rudy, unless he's got an injury or something, maybe the Warriors just know what they have with him, just hasn't played the last, 3 games? And barely played at all across preseason. And then McGruder has obviously been in concussion protocols and gets his first minutes in the final game. And he looked like a guy who was fighting hard and pushing as hard as he could for that 14th roster spot because he was not shy and he was very active, to be fair. So credit to him, he was active. You could clearly tell he was on the floor because he was doing a lot of different stuff. He wasn't shy at all in putting up shots. He was ultimately 3 of 9 and only 1 of 6 from 3-point range. I just wonder what it means. I wonder the fact that he actually played significant minutes in this one and the fact that Rudy Gay didn't. I wonder what it means for this 14th roster spot. I also wonder if the Warriors could just leave it open still. And maybe, like, I don't know what the state of other rosters necessarily is in terms of teams. I know, was it the Nets, I think, just waived Darius Baisley. He's an interesting prospect. Like, I don't know the state of other rosters in terms of guys that may be waived or bought out potentially over the coming days. Like, do they have to make this decision before the season starts? Now, obviously, if they don't, then Magruder and Gay just have to bugger off kind of thing, and that'd be a bit weird to piss them off and then bring them back at some point. But like, those guys aren't difference makers at the end of the day. They aren't. They could play occasionally for you. But even aside from, like, these 13 guys that the Warriors have can all play. There's no guys on this team where it's like, oh, that's a disaster if he plays even a minute in any of these games. You go down the line, the kind of top six, then your second unit with Kuminga, Moody, Payton the second, Surridge, Corey Joseph, and then the two rookies, Pajemski and Jackson Davis. Like, they're not going to be a disaster if they play. And that just tells me, like, do they need to make a decision on the 14th roster spot? Because I'm not particularly sure that Magruder or Gay are winning me over or winning anyone over emphatically. Just something to think about. Anyway, I've been going for over 41 minutes here. We'll leave it. No more comments. You can, if you do have any other comments, you can leave them on the YouTube channel, obviously, on any of the videos, and I'll pick them up. If you've got any thoughts you'd like me to share on the next episode of the podcast, probably have one or two maybe coming before opening night tip-off here, obviously, against the Phoenix Suns, Tuesday night, American time. Wednesday, for me, Australian time, absolutely perfect. Looking forward to it. I'll do a post-game live after that one as well. There'll obviously be plenty of reaction to that. Plenty of probably overreaction based on just one game of the regular season, but you know how it is. Otherwise, you can tweet me at POK252. That's POK252. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, please do so. That would be greatly appreciated. You can, of course, find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. But other than that, guys, thank you to everyone that tuned in to any of these post-game lives. This is the fourth one over 5 preseason games that I've done. Looking forward to hopefully continuing to do them and getting more people coming in and watching and having more people comment and provide their reaction to every Warrior game immediately post. So other than that, as I said, maybe one or two podcasts coming. Hoping to do one with a good friend of mine, Lieven, who we've done a couple of episodes over the off season already. Looking forward to doing another one with him, probably on just general NBA talk rather than the Warriors, and then also do one specifically on the Warriors and talking about their preseason opener against the Suns and more takeaways from preseason as well. But other than that, guys, once again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one.